Okay, so let's unpack this. Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive.
It's great to be here.
Today, we're tackling one of the most consequential tensions in leadership. It's that high-stakes moment where your logic, all the data, it screams, move now, execute.
Right. Everything lines up on paper.
Exactly. But then there's this deeper, sort of quieter sense that asks, are you really making this decision aligned with something bigger than your own expertise?
And that's the silent struggle that we found in the material. It dictates really the ultimate success or failure of a leader.
Right.
Because the biggest threat isn't a lack of skill. It's not strategy. It's the illusion that you can lead well, sustainably, without guidance beyond yourself.
So the question for you listening is, well, it's pretty essential. Are the decisions you're making truly guided, or are they just educated guesses at heart?
And the payoff here is huge. It's about clarity when everyone else sees chaos. It's insight that goes beyond the data.
And it's influence that's rooted in like a real purpose, not just the power that comes with your title. So when we first get into leadership, we're taught to lean on our training, trust our expertise, and, that works.
For a while, yeah. It works until it doesn't.
Until it runs headfirst into a problem that just doesn't fit the model.
Right. And even the sharpest mind has blind spots. The sources are really clear on this. That transition away from dependence, it's not a big dramatic moment. They call it the subtle drift.
The subtle drift, I like that.
It's this slow slide. You go from a posture of dependence to one of self-confidence. And the irony is that it often starts with success.
So you start believing your own hype.
Precisely. A few wins, you hit your metrics, you land a big client, and these things confirm your competence. And that competence, well, it breeds confidence.
And you start applying that spiritual dependency selectively.
That's the perfect word for it. You still surrender the massive, the terrifying decisions that keep you up at 3 a.m. But the routine stuff, the operational strategy, who to hire, you assume control. You default to this is what a good leader does.
And pretty soon, efficiency starts to replace the slow work of discernment.
And that's the danger. Ego replaces intimacy. The leader might still talk about faith, but the engine driving 95% of their day-to-day decisions has become solely human.
And let's be clear about what that ego looks like. It's not always the screaming arrogance you see in movies.
No, it's much more subtle. The sources really break it down into 3 common forms.
The first one is overconfidence and experience. That little voice that says, I've handled 10 crises just like this. I know the playbook.
It sounds like prudence, but it's really a failure to see that God might be doing something new. You trust your history more than you trust the Spirit to, innovate.
Okay, and the second one, over-attachment to outcomes.
This is the performance trap. You want the good results, the growth, the positive press so badly that they become more important than the faithfulness of the process.
So you start cutting corners, maybe rushing things.
Exactly. The goal shifts from being a faithful steward to just being a successful manager. It's a huge difference.
Yeah, and the third one is, wow, it's insidious. Over-reliance on control. This is where ego convinces you that God's role is just to approve your decisions.
Yes. You treat God like a consultant who just needs to stamp the final plan.
It's ownership confusion.
That's it, exactly. You're seeking confirmation, not correction.
And that's where the navigation analogy from the source material is so helpful. Relying only on your own instinct is like navigating an ocean with a compass that's off by just 1 degree.
You won't notice it on day one.
Not at all. But the longer you sail, the farther you drift from where you're supposed to be.
So if that self-reliance is the long-term threat, then the solution has to be a posture of surrender, a strategy of trust.
And the sources are clear. This isn't just, poetic comfort.
No, it's positioned as the most robust leadership strategy available, period.
It's anchored in these really powerful biblical ideas.
Yeah.
Like Proverbs 16.3, commit to the Lord whatever you do, and he will establish your plans.
The order there is so important. Commitment first, then establishment follows.
And then there's that incredible promise in Isaiah 30.21. Whether you turn to the right or to the left, you will hear a voice behind you saying, this is the way, walk in it.
For a leader facing a huge crossroads, that's transformative. It reframes uncertainty. It's not a deficit anymore. It's an opportunity for divine direction.
What I found really insightful here were the counterintuitive examples, moments where leaders made choices that defied all conventional logic. Let's start with Moses.
Right. A man raised in Pharaoh's household. He had the best administrative training in the ancient world.
You'd think he'd rely on that.
But he couldn't,
Yeah.
leading 2 million people through a desert. Egyptian logistics don't cover that. So when the pressure was highest, he didn't default to his training. He said, if your presence does not go with us, do not send us up from here.
Which is just a staggering choice. In our world, that's choosing to wait instead of making progress. It's hitting pause on a major launch because the alignment isn't there.
Exactly. It completely redefines what progress even means.
Okay, then there's Jehoshaphat. He's surrounded by 3 armies.
A military leader's instinct is to, what, gather intel, rally the troops?
Right, but he starts somewhere else entirely. His confession was, we do not know what to do, but our eyes are on you.
That's radical vulnerability.
Yeah.
In most corporate cultures, admitting I don't know is seen as a failure of planning.
But the sources suggest it's the opposite.
That it's a divine invitation. It forces you out of self-reliance into a place where God can actually provide an insight that your team could never come up with.
And then finally, Peter, the expert fisherman.
The ultimate expert. Knows the water, the boat, the fish, everything. And after a whole night of catching nothing, this carpenter, Jesus, tells him to let down the nets again.
Logically, it makes 0 sense.
0. But his response is the core of this whole deep dive. He says, but because you say so, I will let down the nets.
That's it. Obedience that seems illogical on paper, but proves supernatural in the outcome. His expertise had to submit to a higher authority.
Okay, so if the strategy is surrender, why is it so hard? Why do we keep defaulting back to control?
That's the big question.
The sources point to 2 powerful forces that pull us back. The first one is fear.
But fear doesn't always show up looking like panic.
Almost never. It wears the sophisticated mask of prudent delay or strategic caution.
So how do you tell the difference? Isn't it a leader's job to be strategically cautious and manage risk?
That's the crucial discernment challenge. The insight here is that fear doesn't always make you run away from a problem. Sometimes it convinces you to stay exactly where you are, where it's comfortable.
So you're clinging to the known.
Exactly. You avoid the necessary pivot or the hard conversation because the status quo feels stable even if God is calling you to move. So good risk management is motivated by seeking clarity. Fear is motivated by avoiding discomfort.
And the result is paralyzed leadership disguised as stability.
That's it. And then you have the other threat, which is maybe even quieter, rationalization.
The art of self-deception.
Yes. It's how we compromise without feeling like we're compromising. It uses language that sounds professional and justified.
Like this is for the greater good of the organization or
it's not illegal, it's just creative. Rationalization is your ego defending its own image. And the real danger is what they call ethical blindness. The leader genuinely starts to believe the compromise was wise.
That's terrifying. To lose the ability to see the truth because you've justified it away. How do you break that cycle?
The antidote is confession. Naming the compromise for what it is. But, and this is critical, you can't do it alone.
You need outside eyes.
You need spiritual friends, mentors, people who can act as a mirror to expose the self-deception you can't see. Seeking that kind of counsel isn't a sign of weakness, it's a critical safeguard.
Okay, this all brings us to the practical side. We have deadlines, budgets, teams relying on us. How do we actually move from self-reliance to leaning on God's direction in the real world?
It requires a shift in culture, really.
Right.
The sources outline 3 big changes. First, decisions actually slow down before they can speed up. You build in a pause for discernment.
Okay.
Second, prayer becomes strategic, not just supplemental. It's a force that shapes your analysis, not an afterthought at the end of a meeting. And third, wisdom becomes collective. You actively seek it in scripture, in community, in counsel.
To make that tangible, the sources laid out this framework I found really useful. The decision trust matrix.
It's a great tool. It forces you to evaluate a decision on 2 axes. First is consequence, how big is the impact?
And the second is uncertainty, how many unknowns are there?
Exactly. And this matrix tells you how much discernment you actually need. For example, quadrant 1 is low consequence, low uncertainty.
Routine stuff, you delegate that.
Aggressively. Then you've got high consequence, low uncertainty. You know the risks, the impact is big. That requires deep analysis.
And low consequence, high uncertainty.
Yeah.
That's where you experiment. A/B testing a marketing slogan, that kind of thing.
Right. But the real crucible for a leader is quadrant 4, high consequence and high uncertainty.
That's the pivotal zone.
That's where you're entering a volatile new market or making a huge pivot when the data is conflicting. These decisions demand what the sources call maximal discernment.
Which means you're using every tool you have. Scripture, consultation, prayer, scenario planning, all of it.
And you have to be willing to slow down. In that quadrant, speed is the enemy of wisdom.
That makes it so much less abstract. Now, what about the daily habits? What can you do to build this muscle of trust?
The sources talk about forming a rule of life, a set of chosen habits. 3 really stood out. First, the daily surrender prayer.
Simple, right?
So simple. Just, Lord, lead my mind before I lead others. It resets your posture every morning. Second, silence before solutions. You have to create space to listen. Unhurried, unfiltered time.
Clarity comes from stillness, not more noise.
And finally, the anchor. Scripture before strategy.
Yes.
Before you analyze options, anchor the decision in biblical principles about integrity or service or humility. It shapes the entire conversation that follows. These practices train you away from self-reliance. They're how you trade ego for direction, #text-tag-outro. So to summarize the core transformation we've been talking about, the deepest measure of your influence isn't how sure you are of your plan.
It's how willing you are to release control.
Exactly. How willing you are to be corrected. Leadership is stewardship, not ownership. God doesn't hand you influence to manage on your own. He expects you to manage his resources his way.
And when you embrace that, your influence is reframed. It flows from humility and obedience, not from your position or just asserting yourself.
The leader who trusts themselves leads with position and often burns out. But the leader who trusts God leads with purpose. And that's what sustains impact over the long haul.
Such a powerful distinction.
So as you finish listening, take a moment. Think about a recent difficult decision, maybe one that's still on your plate, and ask yourself honestly, where did I actually put my ultimate trust in that moment? Was it my experience, the data, or was it in God's active guidance?
And if the answer isn't totally clear,
That's not a failure. It's an invitation. It's a profound opportunity to pause, recalibrate your posture, and seek that maximal discernment starting today.